Welcome everyone to the lesson 9. Okay, so we have already discussed uh, total these four reforms: Government of India Act of 1858, Indian Council Act of 1861, then 1892, and then your Modeling Reform, Indian Council Act of 1909. Okay, so now we will discuss about the Government of India Act of 1915. Okay, so this act was simply passed, like whatever the provisions were happened in the Government of Indian Act before that, so it was just to consolidate into uh, at one place, like it was piece by piece, like they were able to recollect that through this act we this is the provision, through this act this is the provision. So now they decided to consolidate all the provisions of the Government of India Act at one place. Okay, so this only happened through this 1915 one. Okay, now your Montagu Chelmsford reformed. Montagu Chelmsford reforms and Government of India Act of a Government of India Act of 1919. Okay, see what was the important point under this reforms. The Secretary of State for India, at that time we all know Secretary of State direct reports to Crown. Okay, direct responsible to Crown. Okay, so the Secretary of State for India was none other than your Montagu. It was Montagu. Okay, and the Governor General was your none other than Governor General, your Prime Minister. So Governor, like today's Prime Minister, so Governor General, and he will be considered as your President. The Governor General was your Lord Chelmsford. Okay, they formulated the proposals of the Government of India Act 1919. They so they together format all the proposals under the Government of India Act of 1919. They together. How that Modeling reforms happened? Similarly, this Montagu Chelmsford reform. Now, this created a new office of the High Commission for India in London and transferred to him some of the function hitherto performed by the Secretary of State for India. So what they have done, they formed new office through this reform. There will be a new office. They created a new office, which means like office will be set up for India, that is called as the High Commissioner. High Commissioner office will be there for India. Where? For India in London. Okay, and that will be transferred to him some of the, and this office will have some functions that are that used to perform the Secretary of State. Now the Secretary of State has shared the power, like transfer the power to the new office that will set up in the London, and now that they will be responsible. Then now they will connect with the Crown for the British Parliament for any kind of provisions or act or any work. It provided for the establishment of a public service commission. So this law was the first one. Like now we are studying for the UPSC and all. So through this law, first time a public service commission came, and now today we used to give several exams for that. Okay, so and even today it is used to tell that British has done two good things to India. One, they have provided one public service commission, and another, that was your railway. Okay, so it provided for the establishment of a public service commission was established. Public service commission. It provided for the establishment of public service commission and a central Public Service Commission was set up in 1926 for recruiting the civil servants. Okay, so this act came into 1919. They give a provision for the Public Service Commission, and through this provision in 1926, Union Public Service Commission UPSC was formed for recruiting who? For recruiting the civil servants. Okay, for recruiting the civil servants. Now, responsible government in the provinces was to be introduced without impairing the responsibility of the governor through the governor general for the administration of the province by resorting to the devices known as diarchy or dual government. Okay, so now it is like central government is not going to interfere with the work of provinces. They are independent to do their work. Okay, so responsible government in the provinces was to be introduced without impairing the responsibility of the governor and for the administration of the provinces by resorting to devices known as diarchy dual government that present today. And similarly, that governor will be there. Governor will be appointed by that reports to central government also. The same kind of things will be set up here. So through this reform, diarchy was established. Diarchy or dual government. Okay. Now, this act provided voting right to the Indian women, and David Lloyd George was then Prime Minister of England at the time. So for the first time in India, Indian women were given voting rights. It was first time. So many things happened during this reform in reforms in 1919. This happened after World War. Okay, first your who did this? So it was done by reform was done through the Montagu and Lord Chelmsford. Okay, now what was the another important thing that they did? One, they will set up a new office that they called as the High Commission Office for India, that will set up in London. Okay, now very important thing, Public Service Commission. What are the UPSC we used to study? So Public Service Commission provision was given through this reform, and in 1926 your UPSC was set up to recruit civil servants. Okay, now through this act only diarchy was formed, like dual government will be there, the power was given, and for the first time Indian women voting rights were given. So there were many things happened through these provisions. Okay, now very important thing, whatever we are going to study in the constitution in the coming sessions, all those are derived from these provisions only. Now the subject of administration, will be divided into two. Subject of administration will be divided into two. One will be your central, one will be your provincial. Okay, and there will be a central subject, there will be a provincial subject. Okay, now within the provincial subject there will be two subjects. One will be your transferred and one will be your reserved. Okay, so the transferred subjects were to be administered by the governor with the aid of ministers responsible to the legislative council, in which proportion of elected members was raised to 20%. So in short, it means like the transferred will be controlled by the central minister. Like central minister have the power. Provincial government can also make the power on transferred subject, and central government can also make the provisions on the related particular transferred subject. But there will be some certain subjects on which only provincial government will able to make the law. Okay. So the reserved subjects were to be administered by the governor and his executive council with no responsibility to the legislature. So what does it mean? This will be your administered by the governor and your executive council. Okay, and in the transferred one, it will be governor with aid of ministers to the legislative council, in which proportion of election will be 70%. Okay, so the previous central government control over the provinces in administration, legislative and financial matter was relaxed, and sources of revenue will be divided into two categories. One will be provided to the provinces, could run the administration with the revenue raised by the provinces themselves. Earlier it was like the financial thing, like center used to pay the financial staff to run the administration. Now now the provinces are allowed to collect the revenues from the state, and from those revenue only they are allowed to run their administration. Okay, so the provincial budget was separated from the central budget. Okay, so now through this reform only, they will have a two budget session, like two budget will be there. One will be your central budget and another will be your provincial budget. Okay, the central legislature retained the power to legislate over the whole country on any subject. Like there were like central legislature will have the power to legislate over the whole country on any subject matter. Okay, like there were like subjects were divided, like okay, you are allowed to make laws, but if required, like currently if you see the certain condition of the today's constitution also, it act as a unitary form of government, where such as in the emergency case, when emergency is declared. So in that case, similar kind of things that our country automatically convert into the unitary form of government. See, in similar kind of case, central government will have the power to make any laws or take any decision on any subject for the country. The control of the Governor General over provincial legislative was retained by providing that a provincial bill, even though assented to be governor, would become law only when assented to also by the Governor General. Like whatever the law you are going to make, like governor are independent to make the law, but it has to be assented by the Governor General. Okay, the governor was empowered to reserve a bill for the consideration of Governor General if it was related to some specific matter. So Governor General has the power to retain any bill. That in today's also these things used to happen. Okay, so they have the power to reserve the bill for the president consideration. Today also similar kind of thing, the governor has the power to reserve a bill for the consideration of the Governor General, and the Governor General in Council continued to remain responsible only to the British Parliament through the Secretary of State for India. There were no changes in the structure of the central government working thing. Okay, and the Indian legislature was made from representative, and the first time it became the bicameral. Through this reform only, India first time became the bicameral. There were many things happening in this reform. Okay, that still is followed in our country through the constitution. The upper house was named as the Council of State. The upper house was known as the Council of State. Okay, and it was composed of 60 members, of whom 34 were elected. 60 members where 34 will be elected. So the here if you see, majority has been removed. Okay, the lower house lower house will be called as the Legislative Assembly. Okay, this was composed of the total 142 members, of whom 4 will be elected. Here also majority was removed. Okay, like now the majority is under the elected members. If people vote for more than the, if people vote for 34 members, so it means like for any making of the law there will be a majority to Indian people also. Okay, earlier it was not so, always majority was used to be kept with British, but now majority can move to the Indian side as well. Okay, as per the voting system. And the electorate were arranged on a communal and sectional basis, developing the Morley-Minto device further. And yes, this communal and sectional basis voting rights were continued as the Morley continued. That's why through this Morley-Minto reforms continued. That's why Minto we are called as the father of communal electorates. Okay, so that was continued. So the Governor General overrides power in respect of the central legislation, where so the Governor General has the overriding power in respect of certain legislation. Okay, that has the power to retain also. What were the power? His prior sanction was required to introduce the bill relating to the certain matters. Okay, so Governor General prior sanction permission is required to introduce any bill related to any particular matter. He had the power to veto or reserve for the consideration of Crown any bill passed by the Indian legislature. Okay, he had the power to reserve any bill for the consideration of the Crown. He had converse power of certifying bill or any grant refused by the legislature. Like he has the power, like if any grant is refused by the legislature, he had the power to certify it also. He like Parliament is not happy with this bill. Parliament has declared this bill should not be passed, but Governor General had the power to certify that bill. Okay, and he could make the ordinances in case of emergency as well. Okay, so these were the major provisions that were considered under the Indian Act of 1919. Okay, so many important things happened. What were the important things under this act? One, that Montagu, Chelmsford together they formed this reform. First was that new office will be there. One will be High Commission for India, that will be set up in the London, and few tasks, a few work they will divide that will be performed by them. Okay, then first time Public Service Commission was introduced through this act only, Government of India Act of 1919, and in 1926 UPSC was formed, which will recruit the civil servants. Now through this act diarchy and dual government were introduced. Through this act only, for the first time, Indian women were allowed to give the voting, were given the voting rights. And through this act only, subject of administration was divided. There will be a central subject, provincial subject. Provincial subject will have a transferred and referred reserved subjects. Okay, and through this act only there will be a two budget session, central budget, provincial. There will be two separate budget for one will be central and provincial will have their own budget. And further, provincial government can run their administration through their whatever the revenues that they have earned through their provinces. Okay, and thus through this act a bicameral India became the bicameral country, and upper house will be known as Council of State, which had the 60 members, 34th will be elected. So majority was also now not maintained under the British side. It could be fall under the Indian side as well now in the central government. And the legislative assembly, earlier also British didn't have the majority, now Indian could rule over that. So 144 members where 104 will be elected one. Okay, so this was all about in this lecture. I guess in the next lecture this act will be over. So there will be only one act is left, Government of India Act of 1935 will complete it there.